Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Apolla's Odyssey. I'm your host, Apolla Asteria, and tonight I am doing a live show on the ancient giants of North America, which is a topic that I think has been talked about a lot more recently because Graham Hancock's work has been more publicized as of late from his show. But of course, like me and many others in the disclosure scene have been talking about this topic for many years. I believe I've had Brad Olson come on here and talk about giants before, but I wanted to gather basically all the evidence that I've seen and kind of throw some things together, make some connections for you all. And, maybe I'm seeing in the comments here, a lot of you are saying that you're very into the topic of the giants and that you know a lot about it. So who knows, maybe I'll bring up something that you haven't heard of before. I just want to bring up what I'm into, what I found out. And if any of you have anything in mind, please feel free to comment it. It's good to be back to doing a live show. I know I haven't been able to do one in a while. I've just been so busy with travels and kind of just getting things straightened out with my personal life. I will probably be changing this set to somewhere else in my home. I might actually be getting rid of this particular set and doing something else. So by the next show, this may be the last show that I'm doing with my spaceship because I have another idea, so we'll see how it works out. But it's good to see everyone in the chat tonight. I have a lot going on this summer, so I'm not sure how often I'll be able to go live on Wednesdays and do my regular shows, but it's really exciting. So in May, I'll be going to Japan, doing a little temple tour and kind of a very interesting shamanic journey, it sounds like. So it's going to be really interesting. Later in May, I'll be doing the Truth Summit 2, which is going to be in Mount Shasta. And you can look on my social media to find details on that. If you'd love to come out to that conference, we would love to have you. So if you want to join me in Mount Shasta, it's Memorial Day weekend, and it's the Living Truth Summit. So look on my social media, you'll find it on there. Also, I am going to be in Glastonbury for the Portal to Ascension conference, which, oh my God, I'm so excited about that as well, because that place has been very special to me ever since I read The Mists of Avalon when I was younger. So I think I'm going to do a different version of my presentation for that conference, my Solutions for Humanity presentation. I think I'm going to focus it more on matriarchal or matriarchal communities and like how that would look, because obviously Glastonbury is a very important place in regards to the divine feminine energy, so should be interesting. I think that's about all the announcements I have. It feels good to be in LA. It's been fresh and sunny, and there's been so much rain this year. It's like the nature is just really feeling nice and fresh this spring. Really loving it. So I hope the weather is nice where you're at. And just looking in the comments here, good to see everyone tonight. We got DJ Sean Thomas, Sylvan Forge, Katrina, Feifei Jules. lots of people on here tonight, so really excited to have everyone on. And before I go live, please make sure to go check out my art, which is over at shamanspears.com. That is how I fund my show, is by selling my art. This is how I fund my adventures. I hope to do more videos on my adventures in the coming months. And I actually just put some new things up on my site besides my latest collection, which is the Ultraviolet collection, which I don't have a lot left. I sold a lot of them already at the conferences. But I slashed the prices on my headdresses. I know a lot of you have been really into those. Just in time for festival season, I actually slashed the prices on them down to $100 a piece, which they took me forever to make, so it's a good price. And they fit to any head size. Also, I have my dragon skull headdresses up on here, which I never put up on here before. I have 3 of them left. I've only ever had them with me in person at conferences, so I wanted to show them on here, see if anyone's interested in them. And also, I made these space cowgirl hats for Burning Man. I guess they can be for a guy too, space cowgirl, cowguy hats. Cowboy. So if you want to check those out, those are also on here. And I didn't make the hats, but I added all the bling or whatever to them, so it's pretty cool. So yeah, make sure you go check those out, because for some reason I haven't sold anything on this site in a while, and I don't know if there's some sort of an issue or something. I'm trying to check it out on my own, but I've been selling a lot in person, so but I'm not sure why I haven't got any orders on there in a while. So if anyone wants to order something, that'd be awesome. Okay, so getting into tonight's show, there's so much evidence to go over, really, and maybe there might be some of you on here who are like, what the heck? She's saying there's giants in North America? I know maybe that sounds a little woo-woo to some of you, so I'm going to get into the evidence that I have, and believe it or not, if it sounds crazy to you, there's actually a ton of evidence of giants in North America. So getting started here, let's just start with the Bible, because I know a lot of people feel that that's a lot of places where people's minds kind of immediately go when it comes to thinking of evidence of giants. So I found this article here. Who were the Nephilim, the Bible's mysterious race of giants? The book of Genesis contains some of the most famous origin myths in Western culture. God's creation of the heavens and earth, Adam and Eve eating the forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden, and God commanding Noah to collect 2 of every animal to save everyone from the flood. But hidden among these better-known stories is an intriguing and somewhat confounding account of fallen angels and a race of superhuman giants roaming the earth. The whole wild story is contained in just 3 verses at the start of Genesis chapter 6. The King James Version goes like this. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and the daughters were born unto them, and that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that. And when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. And pausing there before I continue on here, something that also comes to mind for me with this, the men of renown, whenever I hear that verse, the first thing that comes to mind for me is the ancient heroes of the Greek mythologies. So, like Agamemnon or Hercules, those kind of people. Those are kind of who comes to me when this part mentions men of renown. And I want to get back to that after I finish reading this. So in the original Hebrew, the term for giants and mighty men is Nephilim, which is derived from the Hebrew word nephal, meaning to fall. In that sense, the race of giants born of unholy unions between divine sons of God, i.e., angelic beings, i.e., aliens, and mortal daughters of men, i.e., human females, are better translated as the fallen ones. So while the giant Nephilim are barely mentioned in the Genesis narrative, they were the subject of great fascination in the later apocalyptic literature, especially the Book of Enoch. And in that text, which didn't make it into the Bible, or well, technically it was originally in the Bible, but it was taken out, a group of lusting angels or aliens conspires to sleep with human women, giving birth to a race of giants that spoil God's creation so completely that he has no choice but to send the flood waters and wipe Earth clean. And so, okay, let me just continue a little bit here. I know what you're all thinking watching this. I can already see the comments. But okay, let's go on to the watches part. So the three-verse Genesis account of the Nephilim only hints at the notion that the unions between the sons of God and the daughters of men were a transgression. But later, Jewish writers ran with that idea and expanded the cast of characters to include a rebellious and sinful band of angels called the Watchers. In the text known as the Book of Enoch, likely written between 300 and 200 BCE, a group of 200 angels led by the angel Semjaza hatch a plot to take wives from the beautiful and comely daughters of men. They know that what they're doing is a great sin, so they make a pact to follow through with it at all costs and suffer the consequences together. The rebellious angels are called by the Aramaic word Iron, which is derived from the meaning awake. Therefore, Arian has sometimes been translated as the awakened ones, but more often they're called the Watchers, because their job as angels was to remain vigilant and watch over mankind. Later in the Book of Enoch, even the loyal angels are called Watchers, but the name is mostly associated with the bad guys. So, moving on here. Okay, so I'm going to move on to some other things. But, let's mix out of that. Okay, so I know what you're all thinking here. Just looking at the comments here. But, so obviously the first connection that I think is coming to a lot of your minds is the Anunnaki connection, or, the Sumerian tablets and the connection with all that. Like, so, I think a lot of you may have or may not have the understanding that these watchers or fallen angels were probably, another race that came down and either interbred with early humans or helped genetically manipulate early humans, which I've talked about a lot in previous shows. So, yeah, I think there's like kind of a common understanding with a lot of researchers that what could have happened here is that when they interbred, they created kind of these larger humans or giants, and it was kind of like a mixed breed. And over time, obviously, these people or giants, they kind of kept interbreeding with humans and sort of, died out over time. And there's obviously a lot of stories. I know that I'm going to talk about this later, but the Native Americans in North America have a lot of stories of going to war with ancient giants. And obviously, tonight's show I'm talking about giants just in North America, but there is a lot of historical accounts and evidence and actual skeletons found of giants all over the world. So obviously, this was an ancient race that was around and could have been some sort of hybrid between early humans and some other race from the stars. So this is, definitely very interesting, and I want to hear what you all have to say in the chat here. But I see the story here, or someone posted here. Enoch was known as the King of Kings. So in the Book of Enoch, if you haven't read that, I highly recommend it. It's very interesting because it really goes into the story of Enoch being taken up into the sky in a fiery chariot. Like, what does that sound like to you? spaceship, right? And he goes around the solar system, and and then it talks about the flood that was caused because of these fallen angels or aliens interbreeding with humans, and people didn't like it, or the you know extraterrestrials or whatever they were didn't like it, so they caused a flood on the planet to wipe them out. And so there's a lot to this here, a lot to unpack, and that's just the bare minimum. But if you really think about it, I mean, every ancient culture around the world has some sort of story like this. Every ancient culture has a flood story. Um, so this is all interconnected. So moving on here, like I said with tonight's show, I want to focus on the giants in North America. And Gibb here says, oh, who's on the wrong one? Gibb here says the Nephilim were the reason for the flood. Exactly. Okay. Oh, and I want to pull up Fei Jules' comment here. There are tons of proof of giants. Giant books, giant doors, giant steps, etc. I didn't even think to put that, piece of evidence in here, but that is, definitely very interesting. When I was in Crete, I saw these giant axes in the museum that were found in Crete that were like literally, I mean, taller than a person. And it's like, why would people create axes that are literally taller, like twice as large as like a normal average human? I mean, who would be able to even use them? Like, why would axes be made that would be unable to use? So I think someone was using those. Also, the giant books that she just mentioned. There are giant books that are, in ancient collections all around the world. I'm sure most of them are probably in the Vatican. But just looking at that, I mean, that's definitely very interesting. Also, archaeologists have discovered enormous human skulls and bones all over the world. So let me get into that part next. So let's see here. Sorry, just trying to find the right article here. 1 second. Okay, so I'm going to start with the top 10 discoveries of giants in North America. And this is a great photo here. Let me see if I can just click on this for a second and pull this up. This photo is shared a lot. I know my friend Brad Olson, whenever he gives presentations on this, he always pulls up this photo. And so you can't really see so these are giant skeletons that have been found around the world on record. So what is it? Okay, so number 1 here was this very tall one. It's 18 feet tall, and it was found in Pennsylvania. Yes, it is true. That is true. Number 2 here was found in Lompoc Rancho, California, and this one is 12 feet tall. Number 3 here was found in Beaver Lake in the Ozarks, Arkansas. This one is 10 feet tall. Number 4 here. Let's see, number 4 here was found on Catalina Island, and this one's 9 foot 2 inches. Catalina Island, that's off the coast of California, if you don't know. Very interesting place. And I want to get into what's interesting about that in regards to geologically why it was found there a little bit later tonight. So number 5 was found in San Diego, California. This one's 8.5 feet tall. Number 6, Miamisburg, Ohio. And that one's 8 feet tall. And just going through here, the next one is found. The rest of them are around 8 feet tall. The rest one is Missouri, Iowa, Iowa mounds, Virginia, West Virginia. That one's at 7 feet tall. And then Serpent Mound, where I just got back from, and that one's 7 feet tall. So, I mean, just think of someone you know that's like over 6 feet tall. Pretty, pretty crazy already. Imagine someone who is 18 feet tall. That is bigger than probably the tallest person you know, or over twice the size as the tallest person you know. So this is pretty crazy stuff. And this is all, like I said, obviously, real evidence here. Oops. And so let's get into this article here. So this is on one of my favorite sites, Ancient Origins. Really amazing site. So the top 10 giant discoveries in North America. The Iroquois, the Osage, the Tuscaroras, the Hurons, the Omahas, and many other American Indians all speak of giant men who once lived and roamed in the territories of their forefathers. All over what is now the US are traditions of these ancient giants. And before I go on here, I want to just say real quick and make a little disclaimer. I was seeing all over online that these articles from like mainstream media organizations basically saying that people coming out and talking about giants in North America are trying to whitewash the history of the indigenous people. And I say that that is utter rubbish because I know personally many indigenous peoples who uh, say that this story is true and it is part of their own legends and mythologies. So, people that are out there saying that in a lot of these articles online have no idea what they're talking about. Just ask the Native Americans, they know what they're talking about. So, over 1,000 accounts of 7 foot tall and taller skeletons have reportedly been unearthed from ancient burial sites over a 200-year period in North America. Newspaper accounts, town and county histories, letters, and scientific journals, diaries, photos, and Smithsonian anthology reports have carefully documented this. These skeletons have been reported from coast to coast with strange anatomic anomalies such as double rows of teeth, jawbones so large as to fit over the face of the finder, and elongated skulls documented in virtually every state. I honestly, just reading that just now, I didn't know that there were elongated skulls found in North America. So that's interesting. So the Smithsonian scientists identified at least 17 skeletons that stood over 7 feet in their annual reports, including one example that was 8 feet tall and a skull with a 36-inch circumference reported from Anna, Illinois, in the Smithsonian Annual Report of 1873. An average human skull is about 20 inches in circumference. The Smithsonian Institution is mentioned dozens more times as a recipient of enormous skeletons from across the entire United States. The skeletons mentioned no longer seem to exist regardless of their actual size, and the remaining ones that were on display were removed and repatriated by NAGPRA, Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. While the authors certainly support this law, it does present a moral and ethical conundrum in terms of trying to ascertain the proof everyone wants to see, physical evidence of giants. And so here's evidence of all the older articles there. In this unique top 10, we look at the examples of giant skeletons that were reported from across North America, although we warn you now that number one is so large we admit it may not be authentic. Our countdown begins at the most important mound sites in America and quite possibly the world. So number 10 is Serpent Mound, Ohio, where I just got back from for the equinox. And by the way, I guess I didn't talk about it since coming back, but I did see the sunrise from the equinox at the Serpent Mound event that was presented by Star Knowledge. And it was really amazing, very incredible experience. I went out on Serpent Mound, so the area where you can see the sunrise on the equinoxes was right here. right here. You look out from this area. So I came over here on the trail and stood and watched with a number of people. And it was actually opened. The event was opened to us a little earlier than, or the area or the land was open to us before they normally open it, so that we were able to go see that. That was a really incredible experience. I have to say, I saw so many colors coming from that sun that I have never seen in my life when it came up. I cannot even explain to you what I saw. It was very interesting. But yeah, so very interesting, and a lot of people say that there were skeletons found in this area. So I guess that's what we're going to get to right now. The Great Serpent Mound is a 1,370-foot long prehistoric effigy mound located near Peebles that has been thoroughly researched by Ross Hamilton, who has written extensively about his mysteries and the giants discovered in the area. Recent radiocarbon analysis dates it to around 321 BC. This puts it at the realm of the Adena civilization, who were present in this area at the time. In the 1890s, Professor Frederick Ward Putnam excavated some of the mounds next to Serpent Mound and found only 6-foot tall skeletons, which is pretty large still. But a postcard showing one 7 feet in height was recently rediscovered by researcher Jeffrey Wilson. It may have been one of those excavated by Putnam, as he was the only person to dig at this site. Ross first published the book A Tradition of Giants, and it clearly states it was from Serpent Mound on the postcard. But there is still debate to where the photo of the 7-foot skeleton was actually taken. Notice that the legs were cut off at the knees, so is 7 feet is what we actually see, or is it the estimation? Um, could it have been more like 8 feet tall if the shins and feet were intact? So very interesting. So number 9 is Crescent Mound, West Virginia, 1959, and that is a 7-foot tall, 2-inch skeleton. In 1959, Dr. Donald Drago, the curator of the section of man at the Carnegie Museum, unearthed a 7-foot, 2-inch skeleton around the complete excavation of the Crescent Mountain in northern West Virginia. This individual was of large proportions. When measured in the tomb, his length was approximately 7 feet, and all the bones were heavy. So Drago published a photo of the actual skeleton in his book, so there is no doubt that it was authentic. Drago joins many other university-trained anthropologists and archaeologists who reported discovering skeletons over 7 feet in length in burial mounds, often with anatomical anomalies. A few of the professors reporting these skeletons finds that Dr. Walter B. Jones, Moundsville, Alabama, 7'6", and many 7-footers, Dr. Forrest Clements, head of anthropology, and so on. So number 8 is in the mounds in Iowa, a 7'6" skeleton. This account was the Worthington Advance describes the ethnological work of the Smithsonian Institution's Division of Eastern Mounds and quoted the director of Bureau of Ethnology at the time, John Wesley Powell. The image below accompanied the news report. It is a matter of official record that in digging through a mound in Iowa, the scientists found the skeleton of a giant who, judging from actual measurement, must have stood 7 feet 6 inches tall when alive. The bones were crumbled to dust when exposed to the air. That's crazy. So that is definitely very old. Steelville, Missouri, 1933, an 8-foot skeleton. As part of the Search of Lost Giants show, Jim and fellow researcher James Clary investigated the following account that had this heading. An ancient Ozark giant dug out near Steelville. Strange discovery made by a boy looking for arrowheads gives the Missouri town an absorbing mystery to ponder. He turned up the complete skeleton of an 8-foot giant. The grisly find was brought to Dr. R.C. Parker here and stretched out an enormous length in a hallway of the office where it has since remained the most startling exhibit Steelville has ever had on public view. While reading through the microfilm at the Steelville Library, three reports of the find were uncovered, including the photo that shows Les Eaton, a 6-foot man, laid out next to the 8-foot skeleton in Parker's office. And so that's the difference. I mean, that's a tall person already, a 6-foot person. Look at that difference. And of course, it was shipped to the Smithsonian and never heard of again. And this is a common thing that happens in all these stories. So I don't know what's going on with the Smithsonian or why they're hiding everything, but maybe they should stop doing that. So moving on here. Miamisburg, Montgomery County, Ohio, an 8-foot, 1.5-inch skeleton. Miamisburg Mound is believed to have been built by the Adena culture anywhere between 1000 and 2000 BC. It is the largest conical burial mound in Ohio, once nearly 70 feet tall, the height of a 7-story building, and 877 feet in circumference. Hugh investigated the site in September 2012, and after talking to some researchers at the local historical society, he found there were other skeletal remains reported in the nearby area. Numerous skeletal remains were uncovered from the mound, including a giant jawbone and bones of an unusual size. But it was the discovery of a half-mile away that became a national sensation and was reported in the Middleton Signal, January 17, 1899, with the headline, "Bones of Prehistoric Giant Found Near Miamisburg." The skeleton of a giant found near Miamisburg is the cause of much discussion, not only because of the curious and illiterate, but among the learned scientists of the world. The body of a man more gigantic than any ever recorded in human history has been found in Miami Valley in Ohio. The skeleton is calculated must have belonged to a man 8 feet 1.5 inches in height. So Professor Thomas Wilson, curator of the prehistoric anthropology at the Smithsonian Institution, said the following after examining the find. The authenticity of the skull is beyond any doubt, its antiquity unquestionably great, and to my personal knowledge, several such crania were discovered in the Hopewell group of mounds in Ohio. The jaws were prognathous, projecting beyond the face, and the facial index remarkably low. So number 5, we have the San Diego Giant, 1895, an 8-foot 4-inch mummy. This fascinating discovery reports a giant mummy found in San Diego that is currently believed to be a hoax. However, let's take a closer look, as there is some intrigue and inconsistency in the popular story. The first report appeared in 1895 with the subheadings 9 feet high and probably a Californian Indian, measurement well authenticated. Other big men and women of fact and fable who are famous types in gigantism. When accurately measured, it turned out to be 8 foot 4 inches and was carefully inspected and measured by Professor Thomas Wilson, curator of the Department of Prehistoric Anthropology in the Smithsonian Institution, and by other scientists. And here's a famous photograph of that there. The San Diego Giant was purchased by the Smithsonian for $500, over $14,000 in today's money, in 1895, although they later claimed it was a hoax. Right. So 13 years later, in 1908, when the mummy was being exhibited, the Smithsonian ran some tests and suddenly dismissed it as a hoax, saying it was made from gelatin. The fact that it took that long and after spending $500 to acquire it, plus the fact that it was carefully inspected by experts 13 years earlier, does suggest there may be more to the story than meets the eye. And if you look at the Smithsonian's history with covering this up, it makes even more sense. So I'm just going to move on here. Okay, so it says here, a similar mummified giant also turned up in Spiro Mounds, Oklahoma. And it was on display for many months before it disappeared. Interesting. So number 4 is Catalina Island, California, and this giant is 9 foot 2 inches. The Channel Islands off the coast of California have turned up numerous oversized skeletons. The story is intriguing and controversial, and it stars amateur archaeologist Ralph Glidden and his bizarre museum. But before the main act, a German naturalist got the story going in 1913. Dr. A.W. Verstenen reported unearthing an 8 foot tall giant with artifacts such as mortar, pestles, and arrowheads on Catalina. He was told of a legend while in Mexico of a giant and noble race that lived on the island who existed long before the white man and had since vanished. Amateur archaeologist Ralph Glidden unearthed and collected a total of 3,781 skeletons at the Channel Islands between 1919 and 1930. Working for the Hay Foundation of New York, he unearthed a 9 foot 2 inch skeleton and several measuring over 7 feet. A skeleton of a young girl, evidently of high rank within a large funeral urn, was surrounded by those of 64 children in various parts of the island. More than 3,000 other skeletons were found, practically all the males averaging around 7 feet in height, one being 7 feet 8 inches from the top of his head to the ankle, and another being 9 foot 2 inches tall. As part of the search of giants, Jim and Bill Vieira visited Catalina to investigate the contents of the box, and indeed, there were photos of hundreds of skeletons and skulls, excavations, artifacts, and burials. They also uncovered an account of a 28-inch femur unearthed by Glidden on the San Nicolas Island, reported by the judge of Avalon, Ernest Wendell. This would make the skeleton over 8 feet tall. So number 3, we have here Beaver Lake, Ozark Caves, Arkansas, 1913, a nearly 10-foot skeleton and huge skulls. This account is from Ozark Cave in Arkansas and is found in the New Age magazine, volume 18, 1913, given by a highly regarded reporter, Victor Schmoffelmeyer. The New Age, skulls of giant cavemen. So during the filming of The Search of Lost Giants, the site of the cave was investigated. It had been flooded with the damming and creation of Beaver Lake between 1960 and 1966. Bill Vieira and professional scuba diver Mike Young dived into the lake and found a huge shelter cave believed to be the site of the skeletal finds. While a 70-foot stone wall was found in the entrance of the cave, showing likely human habitation, no more clues were forthcoming. Text from the original article reads as follows. While the historical features of the Ozarks held our attention, by the most fascinating discovery was one made by an aged and recluse naturalist who for 10 years had lived in the shelter cave near where we camped. This person spent much of his time digging in the ashes, which the floor of many of these caves. At the depth of more than 3 feet, he found the remains of several giant human skeletons, including an almost perfect skull, which differed in many particulars from a modern specimen. When partly joined, the largest skeleton was almost 10 feet tall. Dad Riggins showed us hieroglyphs covering the Palisades, thought to be thousands of years old. And number 2, we have Lompoc Rancho, California, 1819, and this is a 12-foot skeleton. In 1819, an old lady saw a gigantic skeleton dug up by soldiers at Prisma on Lompoc Rancho. The natives deemed it a god and was reburied by the direction of the padre. This short report reemerged from a broader range of details in 1833, and now various authors and websites repeat the same story. It goes something like this. Soldiers digging a pit for a powder magazine at Lompoc Rancho, California, hacked their way through a layer of cemented gravel and found a 12-foot sarcophagus. The skeleton of a giant man about 12 feet tall was found inside. The grave was surrounded by carved shells, huge stone axes, two spears, and thin sheets of porphyry, purple mineral with quartz, covering the skeleton. There were covered with they were covered these were covered with unintelligible symbols. He had a double row of teeth, both upper and lower. The soldiers consulted a local tribe of Indians who, after going into trance, exclaimed that they were geographically displaced Allegheny Indians from the Ohio Valley area. When the natives began to attach some religious significance to the find, authorities ordered the skeleton and all the artifacts secretly reburied. No further information is available, so it is impossible to verify this information, but numerous other skeletons of this height have been reported in such newspapers. And it goes on to list those. And so number one is West Hickory, Pennsylvania, 1870, and this is the 18-foot skeleton. So the headline here reads, they exhumed an enormous helmet of iron which was corroded with rust. Further digging brought to light a sword which measured 9 feet in length. The report continued that they had discovered a well-preserved skeleton of an enormous giant. The bones of the skeleton are remarkably white, the teeth are all in their places, and all of them were double and extraordinary size. It was estimated to be 18 feet tall, and the bones were being prepared to be sent to New York. Clearly, however, this could be an exaggeration, as 18 feet is unheard of in historical record. But the matter of fact description is intriguing. Interestingly, the discovery was reported to be buried 12 feet below a mound, so it could suggest a deep antiquity, however tall he was. And so here's the old article here. And we hope this tiny section of accounts. Okay, and so that's the end of the article. I know that was a lot. I actually have a lot more to get into, so let me see here. I'm going to come back and look at your comments. Okay, so just looking through the comments here, let me see here. Okay, what did I want to get in next? I might do a part 2 of this show because we are going so long here. Okay, so here's another account that I think is really interesting. And this is one that people talk about a lot, and that is the Lovelock Cave in Nevada, a tale of giants or a giant of tale of fact and fiction. So the Paiutes, a Native American tribe indigenous to parts of Nevada, have an oral tradition that they told to early white settlers of the area about a race of red-haired white giants or barbarians that their ancestors referred to as the Si Te Ka. The story was written down in 1882 by Sarah Winnemucca Hopkins, a daughter of a Paiute chief, in her book Life Among the Paiutes, The Wrongs and Claims. These giants were described as being vicious, unfriendly, and cannibalistic. In this story, the Paiutes speak of a great battle that took place which led to their extermination at the site known today as the Lovelock Cave. During the early part of the 20th century, archaeologists found thousands of artifacts inside the cave, leading to a lengthy investigation or excavation of the site and speculation that the Paiute legend was real. And this cave is actually, I believe, in between Vegas and Los Angeles, and I've actually passed by the area a lot. I believe that's where it is. I know there's a cave between there, and I've been meaning to check it out. It's like usually when you're spending a long weekend in Vegas, you kind of want to get back home. So I can never convince anyone I'm with to actually take the time to really check it out with me, but hopefully in the future. So the Paiute legend of the Lovelock giants and their massacre at the Lovelock Cave. The Site Ka or Sitaka literally translates to tool eaters in the northern Paiute language. The tool is a fibrous water plant which, according to legend, was woven by giants in rafts in order to escape attacks by the Paiute. They used the rafts to navigate across what remained then of Lake Lahontan, an ancient lake that once covered most of northern Nevada during the last ice age. As the Paiute tale goes, after years of warfare, all the tribes in the area joined together to rid themselves of the Siteka. One day, the tribes chased down the remaining red-haired giants, and they took refuge in a cave. The Paiutes demanded their enemy come out of the cave, and they fight, but the giants refused. The coalition of tribes proceeded to shoot arrows at them while starting a large fire at the mouth of the cave. The smoke drove out a few who died in the hail of arrows, while the rest were all either burned alive or asphyxiated. Over time, the entrance to the cave would collapse, leaving it accessible only to bats and cut off from human contact. So Lovelock Cave, known as Bat Cave, Horseshoe Cave, Sunset Guano Cave, and Indian Cave, is located 20 miles south of modern-day Lovelock, Nevada. It's a very old cave that predates humans on the continent and in prehistoric terms was underneath Lake Lahontan. In 1886, a mining engineer from Lovelock named John T. Reed was told of the legend by local Indians who took him to the site to prove it existed. Reed was unsuccessful in getting an archaeological dig started immediately, but two miners, James Hart and David Pugh, realized the value of guano as an ingredient of gunpowder and created a company to start digging it out in 1911. They stripped a layer of guano from the cave approximately 3 to 6 feet deep using a pick and shovel with little regard to the artifacts and shipped some 250 tons of it to the Hawaiian Fertilizer Company in San Francisco. And so archaeological explorations of Lovelock Cave. So the University of California Anthropology Department was contacted by Hart and Pugh when they reported finding prehistoric artifacts. This spurred the first archaeological dig of Lovelock in 1912, led by L.L. Loud, also of University of California. A second dig took place in 1924, and after finishing the excavations, Loud collaborated on a report that was published in 1929. What Loud found was nothing short of amazing. Approximately 10,000 archaeological specimens were uncovered, including tools, bones, baskets, and weapons. According to the report, 60 average height mummies were unearthed. Duck decoys, among the oldest known in the world, with feathers still attached, and a sandal over 15 inches long was excavated. A donut-shaped stone with 365 notches carved along the outside and 52 corresponding notches inside was also found, which some scientists believe is a calendar. Interestingly, radiocarbon dating done on follow-up visits found vegetable material dating back to 2030 BC, a human femur dating to 1450 BC, and human muscle tissue dating to 1420 BC, and a basket dating to 1218 BC. Archaeologists concluded that this human occupation of Lovelock Cave by the culture started in 15,000 BC. Today's anthropologists call the people who lived in the area the Lovelock culture, with the period lasting 3,000 years. Many archaeologists believe that the Lovelock culture was replaced by the northern Paiutes. So, exploring the Lovelock giants and the remains. There's some debate as to the veracity of the claims made regarding the Lovelock giants. During the initial excavations, there were reports of mummified beings being found of two red haired giants. One was a female, 6.5 feet tall, and another a male, over 8 feet tall. However, no such evidence remains. Because of the Smithsonian, probably. In Sarah Winnemucca Hawkins' book, Life Among the Paiutes, she does not mention giants but does refer to so called barbarians. Skeptics claim that chemical staining by the earth after burial was likely a reason why mummified remains have red hair instead of black, like most Americans or like most Indians in the area. A study done at the University of Nevada indicates that giants were about 6 feet and not up to 8 feet, as have been claimed. To others, the uncovering of 15-inch sandals at the Lovelock Cave is proof enough that the Paiute tale is real. And in the article published in the Nevada Review Minor in 1931, in February and June of that same year, it was reported that two very large skeletons were found in the Humboldt dry lake bed near Lovelock, Nevada. One of the Lovelock skeletons was reported to have been measured 8.5 feet tall and was later described as having been wrapped in a gum-covered fabric similar to Egyptian mummies. The other was supposedly nearly 10 feet long. And here's the duck decoys that I was talking about. Linking the giants of Lovelock Cave with the Uros Indians of South America. Some of the evidence of the Lovelock giants includes a set of images showing a handprint more than double the size of a normal man's hand imprinted on a stone boulder in the cave, which was released by Bigfoot investigators M.K. Davis and Don Monroe in 2013. Along the Peru-Bolivia border, skulls have been found near Lake Titicaca, which claims being made that they were from giants with reddish hair and elongated skulls. The legends tell of the Uros Indians making reed boats and living on islands on Lake Titicaca similar to the Paiute. The Incas apparently drove them to live this way, much like the Paiute's ancestors apparently did to the giants of Lake Lahontan. Today, many of the original artifacts found at Lovelock, but no giants, can be viewed at a small natural history museum located in Winnemucca, Nevada. Objects such as the duck decoys are housed at the Smithsonian, of course, and basketry and bones along the Native State Museum, Nevada State Museum. Okay, so that was another little piece of evidence there. And, I have so much to go over tonight. I'm trying to think if I should do a part 2 of this. I'm just going through the comments here. So the Betwitch Wiggler says, one of my Scottish ancestors was a red-haired giant. He punched a nobleman and was exiled from Scotland. Very interesting. Well, I was actually born with red hair, and there are people in my family that are about 6 feet tall, including my brother, who's probably taller than 6 feet tall. So, I don't know. Maybe there's something to that. I might be a descendant from these giants or aliens or whatever they are. Let's see here. Archaeologists, so Renee Cruz here says archaeologists found a mini sphinx with the head of Roman Emperor Claudius in the ground. Where at? I'm curious to know where that would have been. Okay. So just going through these here. Kasun Lee here says, you should also read the legends of Sri Lanka. There are many mentions of giants, and these giants said to serve for ancient kings from Sri Lanka. Yeah, there's so many giant stories from all over the world. I wanted to start, today with just giants in North America. Sylvan Forge has an interesting comment here. Maybe a Freedom of Information Act request to the Smithsonian for their our skeleton manifest. So basically asking for a Freedom of Information Act from the Smithsonian. That's a great idea. Really, definitely would be interesting. I'd like to see how that would pan out. I'm sure this probably already happened. Maybe it hasn't. So we'll see about that. That would be really cool. Okay, let me see if there's anything else I wanted to get into here. There's just like so much. I think I want to split the rest of this into another show, but let me just get into this real quick. So I wanted to get into. I've heard a lot about giants being unearthed from mounds in Ohio, and there's been a lot of talk about these kind of giant wars that were happening in Ohio and these different mound sites around the Midwest, including where I'm from in Illinois. So I'm gonna get into this. So Abraham. Oh, okay. So this part here gets into Abraham Lincoln's speech. So believe it or not, the president Abraham Lincoln gave a speech about giants in North America. So I just wanted to share that with you all, and that is Abraham Lincoln was 6'4" with his stovepipe hat, and he was a 7-footer. You can imagine how he was considered to be gigantic to people who didn't leave the farm very often. When addressing a crowd at Niagara Falls, he mentioned real giants, saying, "When Columbus first saw this continent, and when Christ suffered on the cross, when Moses led Israel through the Red Sea, nay, even when Adam first came from the land of his maker, then as now, Niagara was roaring here. The eyes of that species of ancient giants, whose bones fill the mounds of America, have gazed on Niagara as ours do now." Yes, he literally said this. So, when common knowledge in the mid 19th century educated Americans has long since vanished, the known existence of ancient burial mounds containing the skeletal remains of very real giants has been discovered and celebrated for a long time before they were ripped from the school books and their bones stolen from the museums. In the early 1800s, large bones in stone graves were found in Tennessee with an average size of the skeletons at 7 feet tall. In 1833, soldiers reportedly found a 12-foot tall male skeleton in California. An almost 10-foot skeleton was allegedly excavated in Indiana in 1879. In 1912 and 18 giant skeletons were reported in the Wisconsin burial mounds. And so that's a very interesting story there. Let me see if I can get into that one. I have so many articles pulled up tonight. So let's see here. I want to get into this Gaia article because I think this one does a good job of explaining what has been found in the mounds across North America. So, giant human skeletons found buried in mounds across North America. Around the turn of the 19th century, there were hundreds of reports from reputable sources of giant skeletons unearthed from ancient burial mounds across America. Human giants are not entirely a product of legend in our history. Andre the Giant is a known example of a man with superhuman proportions and strength, reaching 7 feet 4 inches tall. But Andre's size was the result of gigantism and acromegaly disorders caused by an overactive pituitary gland, which releases too much growth hormone. And with the average human height at 5 feet 6 inches for men and 5 feet 2 inches for women, it's hard to find people of Andre's height, let alone his stature. With the extreme rarity of gigantism affecting roughly 3 in a million, it's surprising how often giants are spoken of in the Bible and North American folklore. David and Goliath, Jack and the Beanstalk, and Paul Bunyan are familiar examples of tales invoking giants. But while these are thought to be myths or legends, is there any possibility that a race of giants once existed, or were their humanoid ancestors significantly larger than us? The mound builders, unusual burial sites. Across the United States, there are burial mounds, or at least their remnants, some as extensive in size as the Great Pyramid of Giza. The Cahokia Monk's Mound in Illinois and Missouri are two thought to be have been built before the arrival of Columbus. And so here's a picture. Oh, sorry, it's down here. Here's a picture of the Cahokia Mound that's in southern Illinois, which is actually, well, that's actually 6 hours south from where I'm from. But the Cahokia, okay, so the Cahokia Mountain is 100 feet tall with a 14-acre base, almost an entire acre larger than the Pyramid of Giza. Monk's Mound is just as tall with a 1,000-foot wide base, but what makes these and other mountains of their kind even more intriguing is that they have been found buried is what has been found buried inside them. Jim Vieira has made it his mission to explore the mystery behind these mounds and others where there is documentation of unearthed skeletons, often of gigantic proportions. Vieira is a stonemason by trade, found himself intrigued after finding a plethora of mysterious stone mounds throughout New England. He found that the construction and particularly the stonework of these mounds was impressive, considering the level of technology at the time. He also noticed the orientation of the mounds was such that the entrances faced a direction that was in alignment with the sun during equinoxes. The mounds were built with massive stones and were present long before the colonists from Europe crossed over. Vieira uncovered old reports in New England of giant skeletons unearthed from these mounds, often with 2 rows of teeth and jaws that could fit over the head of a normal-sized human. The skeletons ranged from 7 feet to 10 feet tall, and while this may sound ridiculous at first glance, it was not an isolated incident and is supported by reports from reputable news sources of their time. So, ancient giants. Discoveries of the giant skeletons were found all over the Northeast, from Martha's Vineyard in Deerfield Valley, Massachusetts, to Vermont and upstate New York. Other reports of the discovery of buried giants were also found in the South, Midwest, and West Coast. In the Ohio River Valley, a report from a local paper that was backed up by the Scientific American found bodies of several giants buried under a 10-foot tall mound. One female skeleton was found holding a 3.5-foot long child. Another of the giant skeletons was buried in a clay coffin, and engraved stone tablet was also uncovered. This particular mound was 64 feet long by 35 feet wide. And apparently, and I haven't been able to find articles of this, but when I was just at Serpent Mountain, Ohio, some people were telling me that the tablets that were found in these mounds, there's actually a museum displaying them, and I forget what language they said was on them, but I think it was the language that we don't know of. And I guess these were all found in Ohio, and this museum is like, no one like talks about this, but you can go find them at this museum. So I'll have to have some friends come on and talk about that in a later show. But the Chickasaw Mound in Arkansas is another instance of the uncovering of a giant skeleton under similar circumstances. The 12-foot mile mound had its name taken from the chief of the Shawnee tribe, who was essentially known to be a giant with incredible strength. Chief Chickasaw lived in the area of Arkansas, and when the mound was uncovered, the skeleton of a massive human being was found. Subsequently, other skeletons up to 10 feet tall were unearthed in the same area, all with similar burial artifacts found with them. Some reports claim that the length of the skeleton's legs to be 5 feet alone. Other reports show large craniums of skeletons with double rows of teeth. And there you can see that. Um, okay, and so the rest of this is mostly like things that I already talked about in other articles. So I think some of the other evidence I wanted to get into was actually more about what's interesting about the way America was once geographically. And I wanted to kind of briefly get into that, but I'm thinking it might be more interesting if I do a show more specifically on that. And just briefly, what I was going to cover was the giant lake that took up most of California at one point, and the mountain ranges, or the ancient mountain range, which was once part of Africa and the Carolinas before the continent split apart. Um, because I just think that's very interesting, and so I think I'm going to get into that with a later show. So before I finish off here, please make sure to check out my spears, which are over at shamanspears.com. Again, that's shamanspears.com. Every spear comes with an ancient sacred scroll that talks about what it means to have one. It's not really ancient, I make them myself, but it's basically a certificate talking about what it means to have one. So make sure you check those out. Again, that is shamanspears.com. You can see that right here at the bottom of the screen. Or I also have the links in the show description. So thanks to everyone for joining me tonight. It was really good to go live again. It's been the first time in a while. I think I should be able to do a show next week as well, hopefully. So yeah, that should probably definitely work. So I guess I'll be seeing you all next Wednesday. So be there, be square. All right, everyone. See you next time. All right. See you all soon. Bye.